very happy to have our next speaker here, Ian Masters, from currently the University of East Anglia, where he teaches broadcast journalism and many aspects of it. He worked for how long at the BBC?
24 years.
24 years at the BBC, also in various functions, from presenter, I think, to within the management structure. And he's also part of, was part of the Thompson Foundation, which maybe you can explain that better than I can.
Shall I do that?
Yeah, that would be great. And he's going to make you think about how far is too far. I did warn you in the program that some of the material in the video might be uncomfortable for some of you. So if it is, just close your eyes. Please.
Thank you very much.
A warm welcome for Ian Masters.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. I hadn't realised until I came here today how difficult journalism was. I think I'll give it up. No? Well, it is difficult. Lots of decisions. Well, I'm going to make it even more difficult for you now. Because, well, I'm going to talk to you, if I may, about... first of all, yes, you said, what did I do? Where's Sarah? She's gone. They're closing the curtains. BBC for 24 years, and then the Thompson Foundation for 19 years. And it was, I have to tell you, that my work with the Thompson Foundation, where I was the controller of broadcasting, that's where I had my happiest time. Because for 19 years I travelled around the developing countries and had just simply a wonderful time. I was invited usually into these countries to introduce them to democratic journalism. And probably my very first year with the Thompson Foundation, I had the most wonderful task in the world. I was invited to South Africa to take the South African Broadcasting Corporation into the Mandela election. Why was I asked to do that? Because they had never, at any time of their history, ever done what we've been talking about today, ethical or fair journalism. They didn't understand the principles at all. So I had 3 months to bring the South African journalists up to a level of being able to handle it as well as a BBC or any ethical democratic news organisation. And it was fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And I loved it. Also with the Thompson Foundation, I went down to a television news station in Doha called Al Jazeera. They asked me to go and bring some democratic thoughts to the journalists at Al Jazeera, which I loved. I thoroughly enjoyed every moment of that as well. So it's been a fast and rocky ride. I have more or less retired now, but Mark didn't want me to sit there sailing my boat and reading the newspaper, so he said, come to the university and talk to some of my students. So you see before you an absolute dinosaur of the world of television. But it's television that I'd like to talk to you about, if I may, just for a little while. Because of what I see as the most important element of a television reporter's work is the pictures. This lovely thing over here is called, not the lady, it's also very lovely, but this thing here is a camera. In the world of television journalism, we love this creature over here, this camera. We love it, because without it, we are precisely nothing. So in my view, we have to use that camera to the best possible advantage, and that might not mean filling the screen from morning till night with talking heads and interviews. For me, it means filling the screen with good pictures. A picture speaks 1,000 words. Let me give you an example of, just out of the blue, of how important pictures can be. If you take a simple little story, an absolutely on the face of it nothing story. We have a light aeroplane and it's flying along, pilot and passenger, and like many light airplanes do in my country, certainly recently, it makes a forced landing in the countryside. But the pilot and the passenger got out and they walked away from it. Now, is that going to make a story in tonight's 10 o'clock main news BBC? No, it is not. Of course it isn't, because it's happening all the time. But if my auntie is there, and I bought her a camera at Christmas time, and she's trying out the camera, because we get a lot of viewers' video coming into us now, as well as the stuff we're shooting ourselves. You see, well, there's a little aeroplane there, smoke coming out of it, and she follows the aeroplane through the sky, and it comes down and it bounces through a hedge, it goes into a field, it turns over a couple of times, it hits 3 cows and sends them scattering all over the place and into a duck pond, hissing and spurting and ducks flying out of the pond. Will that make the BBC News Tonight at 10 o'clock, do you think? Do you think it might? Why? Why?
Because there's an image to go with the news.
And what?
Because
Yeah.
It stands out because it's special. It's like, I don't know how to.
It's an unusual piece of footage, isn't it? And so it was the pictures that lifted that story from a certain death of never ever being spoken about except at the local flying club into a national news bulletin. So we television reporters have a fundamental and basic responsibility. Our first responsibility when our editor gives us a job, one of our first responsibilities is, where are my pictures? And these days we're going out and we're getting all sorts of stuff. But do you think it's possible that some of the stuff that we're actually showing we shouldn't be showing at all? Do you ever feel that any of the pictures that you see should have been censored? Do you think we should have censored them ourselves as the reporter? Do you think our editor should have said, no, there's no way you're going to show that? Have you come across any such stories where you've actually been troubled by what you've seen on the screen? Yeah.
I remember when Gaddafi was still in Libyan civil war, there was a picture released of his dead body with some rebels across it, and I think they showed it here on the news, but the news anchor warned that the images were kind of shocking. So we actually did see a dead body, which I thought that wasn't really relevant for the news.
Ian, can you repeat the case he's talking about? I don't think
Yes.
anybody heard it.
Why take the microphone?
I was talking about the death of Gaddafi in the civil war, that you could see his dead body on the Belgian news, which I thought wasn't really necessary.
Why?
Why? Because it didn't add any value to the news itself.
We all saw that picture. Thank you for the point.
Nice to know he was actually dead.
But isn't that what journalists do? Show the naked truth? And I think it was relevant to know that, to show that he was dead, because he caused so many trouble. I think lots of people wanted to know, wanted to be sure, look, he's dead. And you could see that. I think that's relevant.
Something that is wrong, I think, is when victims of war are being filmed and like they're bleeding to death on the ground, and there's like a cameraman filming it and not helping that person, which is, I think, a case that's been going on for a while now. Do you help the people that are dying on the ground, or do you just film it to have images to show the people that are watching the news?
That's a very good point. Very good point indeed. Anybody else got a view about stuff that they've seen? Yeah. Would you like to shout, or shall I throw the microphone to you?
I don't know, do you hear me?
Do you play tennis or cricket? Stand by. There you go.
Pass it along.
What was I going to say? Oh yeah, I think lately there's just, or well, maybe not only lately, but there's like this huge, people want to see bodies and the media show bodies, but I don't think it's necessary because, you know...
You want to see bodies?
No, I personally don't.
Which people want to see the bodies?
The people who mainly read or watch sensational media.
Do they?
Yeah.
You sure?
I'm convinced, personally I'm convinced. And some journalists show them, those pictures and those that footage, but I think when you enter like a house in a war zone and blood on the walls or like a complete ruined furniture can tell even more sometimes
Sure.
than when you just have a picture of a body. And I think that's more important.
Very thoughtful, very reasonable point of view. Can I have that? Do you have something to say? No. Anybody else have anything to say on the topic for the moment? Over here, maybe? Sir?
Maybe just showing once one picture or one image is acceptable, but reproducing and publishing it again and again or in a certain form, it becomes problematic. I'm thinking about Breivik, for instance, the man who killed in Oslo nearly 80 young people. There was a discussion in Norway on that. How do you show the image of cruelty?
Absolutely. Indeed. And how do you in a case like that? Do you want to come out and do the lecture and I'll go and sit over there?
No, but this is not a case of video footage, but the bus crash that happened with all the Belgian kids in Switzerland was also very controversial because they showed, they had like a front page of Nieuwsblad, a Flemish newspaper, and it showed all the pictures of the children that had been on the bus or that died on the bus, and all the teachers that died on the bus, and they had like pictures of the school trip that they were coming back from, and like I remember seeing a picture of a little boy eating like a sandwich, and yeah, before the crash they had a healthy meal. That was like the line that was underneath the picture, and to me that was like not very tasteful.
It lacked sensitivity. It lacks sensitivity. Yeah. Send one of the fellows in. There we go. Then I'm having it back for a little while.
I remember the earthquake in Haiti, and I read there were hundreds of people who died and stuff, and I couldn't relate to that. I don't have a clue, like hundreds of people is dead. That's bad. But then I saw the pictures of really piles of carcasses, bloated and stuff, and then you're really like, whoa, that's the real truth, and that's completely different than you just reading that there are thousands or hundreds of people dead. But when you see the picture of really like a courtyard filled with heaps of bodies, then you're like, whoa, then it gets serious.
Absolutely right. I agree with you absolutely. And sometimes, is there any excuse for showing, sometimes in my country, I see pictures of an African state. I'm thinking, turn the clock back a few years, of dead bodies in Rwanda and during the genocide, scattered all over the place. If that happened in my country, would we show those pictures? I say to myself sometimes, I'm not sure. Probably not in the way that we're very ready and quick to show from other countries. When I was in South Africa, I came across one or two extraordinary cases of footage that they were willing to show. I can remember on my very first day when I walked into the newsroom at the headquarters, the news editor wasn't very happy that I was there, you understand, because I was there to overturn just about everything that he stood for. And he said, well, look, we've just had a telephone, I've just sent a camera crew out to downtown Joburg somewhere because a man is going to jump off a roof. I said, a man is going to jump off a roof? So he said, yes. He said, but I couldn't get the camera there for the time he said he was going to do it. He said, that's all right. Tell the cameraman to give me a wave. When he gets there, I'll wait. Absolutely true story. That night, to my absolute astonishment, we saw a suicide of a man standing on a high building in Johannesburg, and he jumped off the top of the building, flew through the air, and his head hit the pavement first and split open like a rotten melon. And it was shown. You can imagine my absolute astonishment at that. There is no editorial reason at all why that happened, but that was the sort of thing that could happen in South Africa at that time. I like to think and hope not anymore. I can remember there was a road accident, and the camera crew had turned up, and the reporters there with his microphone, the cameraman standing there, and they have a little boy. He was 14 years of age in the road, clutching his stomach. He was hurting. Oh, okay, what happened, little boy? Oh, well, the car came along at us out of the blue and hit us. And, yeah, well, where did it, what actually happened? I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? You were there, you saw it. And the brutality that this reporter showed to his interviewee was absolutely unbelievable. And it was shown. And I thought, well, what are we doing, showing stuff like this? So it's against that background, my concern over some of the footage that we show, that I want you to watch this little piece of video that I have. It's a very old piece of video. It's actually a BBC training film. And it comes from approximately 1994. It's quite an old piece of training film, actually, but I've never seen anything describe the problem better than this particular training film does. So I'm going to show it to you, and we'll talk about it when you've seen it. Thank you. Let me ask you, what do you think should determine what we show? You've seen plenty of examples there of what could have been shown at the BBC and then what was shown with that particular channel. What do you think should be in a reporter or an editor's mind when the time comes of what we should show? Yeah.
What serves the message?
Sorry?
What serves the message? What image serves the story I want to tell? With that said,
Right.
you can show a lot of blood, but there's one word that I remember what your ex-colleague said. We tend to trivialize cruelty, and we live in a society where everything is too much. So we tend, as a medium, when we want to reinforce our story, send out images that are subvertive towards the previous image. So the core of the message should be, if your message serves, or if your image serves the message, the story, it can be put out.
Yeah, I take that point absolutely. So you have to have an editorial reason to want to show what it is. You have to be able to say why I am going to show this. Do you think that might be, well, let me ask others, how difficult do you think that might be? If you've worked, say, on the Martin Bell story that you saw at the end there, which was reasonable, you've worked on that story for the whole day, and you've had a pretty grueling time. Are you the right person necessarily at that moment to make the decision of what would be shown?
I think not, because at that...
What?
I think not, because at that point you've seen so many gruesome things that the pieces you cut out may still be shocking to viewers, but not necessarily to you, because you've seen the worst of what they've shot. So I think you should always show it to someone who's not familiar with the footage that's been shot, and then...
Yes. I mean, I think that will be very good advice, that if you have a doubt saying, why do I want to show this? I don't quite know why I want to show these pictures. As I've worked around the world, I have had news producers want to show pictures like that for no other reason than it brightens up an otherwise extremely dull news day and will grab the audience in their seats. And that is no editorial reason. But do you think there might be a case with Martin Bell, because he was working there for a long time? Do you think that reporters can become desensitized? And do you think perhaps the early reports that the reporter would send in from a scene of war would be very different to the scene, to the material he'll be sending in 6 months' time? What do you think about that, Howie?
I think it's possible. I think the way to look at it, though, is also from the point of view of the audience. An audience that's been exposed routinely to images of destruction and carnage is likely to grow more and more callous to them. It's then undercuts the justification for running them in the first place. There's actually a concept called, referred to as compassion fatigue, which is a term that was coined by Susan Moeller for a book on photojournalism. And she talks about how, yeah, you look at the footage coming out of the Bosnian War, and the first time we see it, we're mortified, and we're shocked. We're ashamed to be human. We're ashamed that we're part of a race that's capable of doing that to each other. But, you know, by the 5th or 10th or 15th or 25th time, that sense of horror has dissipated, and it's become almost predictable. We don't see what's put in front of us.
Yeah.
And the other part of it, I think, is it's very hard to start discriminating between the slaughters in Bosnia to the slaughters in, it sounds very cynical and insensitive, but I don't mean it that way. The deaths in Bosnia from the deaths.
Well, you yourself said earlier this afternoon, earlier this morning, that journalists are cynics.
Yeah, I did say that. But I'm saying that I mean, as someone who's spent a lifetime watching this or working, you know, with it, it becomes indistinguishable. The places of horror become indistinguishable. The stories of man's inhumanity to man becomes indistinguishable because the symbols we use for them, no matter where they occur, are all the same. It's the same vocabulary. And we do a very poor job of contextualizing them. If the point is to really, we're going to show you what is, well, we can't just stop at that. We have to show why it is.
Thank you. Let me ask our philosophical friend with the wonderful ethics lecture that we said. Yeah, let me ask you a different question. Because I struggle with this just as much as everybody here struggles with it, with this decision-making process. How much do you think it affects the decision-making process, depending where you come from, what your society is, what your own ethics are in your country, what you are used to? Do you think there's likely to be a difference as we travel around the world about that decision-making process?
Absolutely.
Do you think it's fair? Reasonable?
Do you think it's fair?
Do you think it's reasonable that the Japanese will show something quite different to the Americans? The Africans will clearly show something quite different.
That has anything to do with reason. It has something to do with the context where you are, your culture and so on. So that is not reasonable. That's just the case. And you have to take that into account, how your culture deals with such matters. What that exactly means for the Japanese.
So the journalist devolves the decision-making process is assisted by the culture, perhaps. Do you think that's so? Do you think that's so?
Yeah, I think you have to take into account that you don't always have the comfort zone of the BBC or a VRT who's
Sure.
reflecting on what they are doing and have the time and the people to. Sometimes, as journalists, you work for media that's just specialized in showing things that are on the border. And what do you do then as individual journalist when you have such a story, or pictures, or whatever? What do you then on the ground? Let's say when you're not in an environment which is so culturally located as the BBC or
That's a good point.
VRT.
Mm. Yeah, very good point. Let me ask you another question. I ask my. Are we okay for time?
Yeah, about, let's say, 8 minutes.
8 minutes. Okay. He got an extra 5 minutes. He didn't ask for it. He just took it. No, I want to tease him. Let me. No. I'm teasing. Okay, let me ask you, my young friends here, another question. Sorry.
Can you go on with what he just said, with this context idea? That interests me. What would you answer if, for example, in Somalia, they stone a woman who has a lover, they put her in the ground, and they stone her to death?
Yeah.
Right? You take it from Somalia to the BBC to England.
Yeah.
What would you do? Would you put it on air as a...
As my piece from the BBC or the Somalian Broadcasting Company?
You would put the footage of the woman being stoned. Would
Yeah.
you put that on
No.
Okay.
No. I would probably choose extremely long shots, show the woman being led out. Am I going to see the stones thudding into her brain? No. I personally will not do that, although, you see, we journalists don't ever think the same way. This is why I cling on to the hope that if we ask ourselves editorially why we feel we must show this, then okay, we can argue for it afterwards. My worry is with the journalists who simply cannot and do not even attempt to mount an editorial argument of why they would want to show this. But let me ask my young friends different question. There was a piece there about Mr. Drysdale from my own country, in the northern part of my country. He'd been asked to take his little house down that he'd built, and he shot the council official. Yeah? Do you remember something that happened in that? I actually remember the piece because there was a big discussion in the BBC about this. Do you remember the council official actually said something before he died? Do you remember what it was?
Can you show the gun?
Absolutely. Hey, camera, can you show this gun, please? Can you get a shot of this gun? That made me wonder at the time, would that murder have happened at all if the camera hadn't have been there? What do you think about that, Howie? Do you think it's possible? Do you think it's possible?
I think any time a camera shows up, everything changes. You know, it's no longer just something that's happening. It becomes journalism. And
So do you?
The presence of the observer changes the observed event.
So do you think it's possible then that we create some of the major problems of images happen because we are actually there? Give you again my example of the South African story of the man who commits suicide off the top of a 20-story building.
Or even the murder in Rwanda. You don't know if that was shown. You don't know if that was precipitated or by the presence of the camera. Certainly, you know, there's footage from Iran. You know, now with that new movie out, that Ben Affleck movie Argo about the hostages at the Canadian Embassy, who ended up getting spirited out of Iran. The mobs that used to gather in front of the embassy, the U.S. Embassy, where the other hostages were being held, and chant with their fists raised, death to America, death to Satan, and so on. As soon as the cameras were turned off, they all went back to their business.
Sure.
You know,
Sure.
It was an inducement for them to be there and to demonstrate that.
Yeah.
When I worked for Tele2, we had organizers calling us. We will come and demonstrate if you come too. There is an organization called TAC, Taalactiecomité, which is like nationalist links. They're into linguistic stuff. You know, they say like Flemish should be Flemish, and there was back in the day there was a whole discussion nearby Kortrijk of a cultural center showing French movies, which were supported by the Flemish government, right? So this action committee said we're going to demonstrate against that. In the beginning, there were 50 people. We filmed. 2 weeks later, there were 150 people. It took 6, 7, 8 times they came, and it ended up with 800 people because they knew who was coming. We also had a discussion today. You know what? It's the same message. You stop. We stopped it. It never organized this demonstration anymore. So you give them a forum, an amplifier, and they're very happy to speak to more people. So the media has the power.
And of course, then that opens up a new ethical discussion on the imitative effect of television. Certainly does, Mark.
Can I put a case to you? We all seem to be coming around to the idea that it's right to suppress the most horrific of those images, that they shouldn't be broadcast.
No,
they shouldn't
no,
be shown.
no. I don't think I don't think anybody said that.
No?
I don't think so. I didn't say it.
No, okay, well, aren't people here saying we should show everything? That most of that stuff which the BBC suppressed, do people disagree with the BBC decisions? Did the BBC get it wrong?
What do you think? Do you think it was reasonable that the BBC dropped what it did and showed what it showed? Was that a reasonable editorial process? Maybe? Yeah? Okay.
Okay, so if that is a reasonable editorial process, what about, we go back to the Second World War, we go back to the first news crews into the concentration camps. Pictures every bit as horrific as those, piles and piles of bodies being bulldozed away. Those pictures are now important historical documents. We've all seen them. They're part of the narrative. They're part of our understanding of what happened there. If we suppress similar pictures now because they're too hard to take, are we really destroying the evidence for the future?
Yeah, probably we are. Probably we are destroying the evidence for the future.
Back in the day, we didn't have access to that much footage. You know? Now we're bombed with all this.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of footage.
But that footage has been used though, isn't it? You know, it's in archive film, you see it in documentaries, it's regularly...
But you see, there's another problem. This raises another problem, the stuff that we've seen today. And that is, well, of course, we put out a viewer warning. Oh, the pictures you're about to see, some viewers may find upsetting. Well, as far as I'm concerned, most of the guys call to their wives and they go, hey, better come and have a look at this. You know, the BBC's going to show something we're not going to like. And I'm sure an audience is quickly gathered around the screen to see that. But do you remember the point was actually made in this movie? Another factor to take into consideration on the day that we say there is film of this but we could not show you because we decided that the pictures would be too disturbing, so we will not show you. Now that is an absolute censorship and a suppression. But could it be that by saying that we conjure up in the minds of people a situation that was actually 10 times worse than it actually was? Because the human mind is an agile, creative picture maker. Of course it is. We spend a lot of our lives thinking in pictures, believe me, not just me. So could it be, Howie, that when we say we're not going to show this stuff, everybody think, my God, that must have been absolutely sick-making? The power of suggestion is more powerful. So this is something, my friends, you've all got to look forward to. As you go into the media and into television, you've got his problems to sort out, you've got his ethical problems to sort out. Howie's probably, we haven't even heard what Howie's problems are yet. So do you still want to be journalists? Huh? Show of hands, everybody who still wants to be one. Oh, well, there you go. There you go. Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you.